So, not so long ago, I talked a little bit about humor and why the left is no longer funny because being funny requires being offensive. And you know, the other day I was thinking back on that statement in light of Amy Schumer's horrific display of utter unfunniness that has since caused an uproar because of the reflective one-star review that her special received on Netflix from Netflix viewers, to the point where apparently now Netflix is considering changing the way their review system works. Yeah, that sparked some new concerns for me, specifically that, well, first of all, Netflix, I didn't pass any judgment on you for producing Dear White People because it was a show that was not yet out, and I can't pass judgment or review anything that isn't out. As such, I said that I could give no definitive reason to think there was some sort of unabashed, corporately sponsored racism occurring at Netflix. However, this little bit about changing the review system in light of Amy Schumer Special was an additional reason for me to suspect potential bias within the company, which of course is pretty much par for the course for every company nowadays trying to save face against an army of constantly angry social justice warriors and self-hating white liberals demanding constant and increasing diversity, which of course means bending over and bending the knee in religious-esque worship of minorities and women who are not only perfect, yet somehow also in need of protection because they're also as fragile and helpless as a clay pigeon. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Amy Schumer's special, which I admittedly skimmed because after a while the joke became quite unbearable, and I really hesitate to call it a joke. I think it's an insult to jokes, but I will explain further in detail. Yes, if you noticed, I said joke singular, a 1 hour long special with one joke. And that is this. Buckle your seatbelts, friends, for this shocking reveal. This is Amy Schumer's 1 hour long joke. Ready? Vagina. The entire joke is vagina, be it the things she puts into it, or the things that come out of it, or how it looks, or how it smells. Vagina, vagina, vagina. Now, first of all, let me take a joke from a much funnier comedian, Louis C.K. And by the way, as a quick aside, let me be very clear here. Someone's politics, as long as they don't really affect their content to an overwhelming degree, is no reason to either like or dislike that entertainer. You should like an entertainer or a comedian because they're entertaining, not because of their politics or lack thereof. For that reason, I still really enjoy and love people like Louis C.K., even if we really disagree on stuff politically. That has nothing to do with making me laugh. I mean, I still like internet comment etiquette, even though he's an extreme liberal. He still makes me laugh. I can still laugh at his comedy. I listen to 2 LA comedians every single week and have for the last 4 years on Your Mom's House podcast. These 2 sell a shirt that just says Trump is fat. I prefer the term thick, thank you very much. But they're clearly not fans of the man. That Trump is fat joke, however, it's a reference to an ongoing podcast joke that's actually really, really funny. And as such, not only do I not find the Trump is fat thing offensive, and we'll get more into why I don't fucking care if you make fun of Trump, I just find them funny, and it has nothing to do with their politics. And I think, this is just an aside, we need to sometimes lay politics to the side when we talk about comedy and humor. So anyway, back to Louis C.K. He had this bit about the word vagina, where he said that he disliked the word because it's a very harsh and disgusting sounding word, while the word cunt is a great word that is like verbal chocolate, which it sure as hell is. And I find it's very amusing because Schumer Special is all about her smelly animal vagina, and yet she hysterically herself is a giant and has a giant cunt. She has gone out and illustrated just how much of a giant cunt she is quite succinctly by accusing all of the negative reviews attributed to her special as being the fault of a concerted effort by the evil alt-right who hate her for being a woman, without ever stopping to think or consider just for a second that maybe her one and only joke just isn't funny. So why is the joke vagina unfunny? Well, because it's about as funny as the joke fart. Sure, there can be a good vagina joke, I guess. Look at that Louis C.K. joke about the word cunt. That was amusing. But that was a joke about words, not where the thing itself that he's talking about as a word is the punchline. It's frankly just gross. Just like fart, funny because it's gross. So yeah, sure, it's possible for a fart joke to be funny in the same way I guess it's possible for a queef joke to be funny. I can't think of a good queef joke right now, and honestly, queefs are really exactly one note inherently less funny than farts, because queefs are just sounds and not also smells. Oh god, this is so nasty. Okay, listen, listen, here's my point. Just talking about something gross isn't funny more than a couple of times. And of that, 30 fart jokes in a row, no matter how good they are as fart jokes, they're still just fart jokes and they're going to get insufferably dull after a while. Again, this is coming from someone who has, for the last 4+ years, listened diligently every single week to a podcast that is mostly about farts and poop and porn. That's Your Mom's House podcast. Check it out. This is because while I have said humor is offensive, what I meant by offensive when I was talking about Samantha Bee's humor, and Schumer's humor is is certainly pretty offensive in every sense of that word, that is not what I meant by the term offensive. So really what most of this video is going to be is me clarifying the term offensive. What is offensive humor and what makes something funny? Schumer's jokes are offensive, yes, but they're not offensive because they pick apart or challenge some facet of reality that people are not expecting on a complex level, which is what I mean by offensive, and we will get there. Expectation violation theory is pretty much the crux of all comedy. I don't have the time to go into expectation violation theory. This is going to be a long as hell video as it is, I can already tell, but I will throw up some graph or a little bit that explains expectation violation theory. It's really one of the, Judy Burgoon, one of the earliest pieces of research that really solidifies the study of communication science. Anyway, in some capacity, yes, Schumer's humor, it's gonna keep making me laugh this entire time. Hilariously, it's gonna make me laugh more than her entire fucking special. But Schumer's humor is violating perhaps some expectation because she's talking crassly, using repugnant language, to talk both in depth about her vagina and about being a gigantic whore, both in the physical size of her body and in her capacity for being repugnant and disgusting. Yes, that is both offensive and a violation of some socially normative expectations the first time you hear it. But that alone is enough to be funny pretty much exactly once. In my Sam B video, I mentioned a study that identified a sweet spot of humor that is right in the center of being offensive, being based on something real, and being temporally relevant. That's why her special tanked. That's why it didn't work out, Amy. Because it's the same singular comedic note spread across over and over again for an hour ad nauseum. So basically, let me be clear. When it comes to jokes that are offensive, but not offensive by the definition that I'm using, again, we're getting there, there's pretty much two types of offensively funny jokes that aren't offensive by my definition. The first are the jokes that are shocking only because they're really just violating an expectation. That's fart jokes, that's dick jokes, that's cunt jokes. They all just temporarily make you chuckle because you weren't expecting whatever was being said because it was culturally insensitive. But that's only offensive because you weren't expecting it from typical pleasant and polite human conversation. That's really it. There is another type of offensive humor that's not my term, or use of the term offensive, and that can also be funny in a limited capacity. But again, not what I mean when I say offensive. And that's just laughing at someone else's misfortune. So America's Funniest Home Videos, or fail compilations, or on the other side of this same sort of element is mocking someone typically for something they can't help. Their appearance, their intelligence, their looks, their style of speech, all of that kind of stuff. Or for something they said or did. Now I want to make a stipulation on that last bit, because this is where we get into my definition of the term offensive when it comes to comedy. And that's this. It's only going to be funny if it's true. So you can make fun of people all day long, and that can be funny on some level. Again, it will probably get old. But it's only going to be lastingly funny if it's true. Now, leftist comedian talk show pundits think that they're getting to that. They think that they're getting into the offensively funny because it's true angle. But here's the thing. Like I said, one, it's only funny if it's true, and it's also only funny if it's not only true, but there is some stigma or something that is going against the cultural grain that makes it funny and edgy to say, makes it unexpected, violating your expectations. You have to look at all of these things together as a sort of a mishmash of all of the elements that come into making something funny. It has to violate your expectations, it has to be true, and it has to be temporally relevant. What do I mean by that? Well, let me get a little bit more in depth. What I mean by that is that, for example, Leafy's comedy, just making fun of people and how they look, yeah, that's about as one note as a fart joke, and that's why he's unfunny cancer. And that's pretty much what these leftist pundits are now doing. They're just making fun of people, but they're basing it on even less than Leafy bases his comedy on. Because at least Leafy is mocking someone's appearance, and not like these these people don't do that too, by the way. What these leftist pundits are selling as comedy is to go in front of their audience and say over and over something to the effect of, Republicans and conservatives are stupid, they're racist, sexist, transphobic, and they're all rednecks, ha 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 ha. Now you laugh, audience, you laugh in response to me. That's pretty much where they're at. But here's the thing, and here's why that's not funny. Because the only people who will laugh in accordance with their questioning and begging for laughter are those who already agree with the truthfulness of those statements, even though they're not asking for any proof, they just agree inherently. They don't find anything about those jokes offensive, they're just agreeing because that's become the culturally accepted narrative in the United States, at least among leftists. Now, this is a quite limited source of humor, because the only people you can mock in this way by just shouting racist, sexist, whatever at them are white people, specifically white men, and since white people in the United States are about 56% of the population and about 16% of the total world population, now go ahead and divide that in half to only apply to white men, yeah, already coming out of the gate you've got a pretty limited source of humor. Secondly, this is quite limiting because it's based on demonstrable falsehoods and ad hominem claims that are only believed to be true to those who already just agree with leftist narratives outright. For those of us with a brain, still firing at least, for those of us who know that there is some bias, to say the least, in their reporting and misrepresentation in their reporting, these jokes are not funny by virtue of their mockery of someone in a dishonest way. It's not honest and it's not clever, because on a basic level, these jokes are not based in reality, and they're not funny because they're not true. Funny because it's true. We've all heard that phrase, right? It's what Ricky Gervais called the guilt-free truth of comedy. That is, the comedian can essentially stand on stage, drop a little bit of truth, hard truth, a red pill if you will, and it's offensive because it's shocking, and because it's true. It's shocking because it bucks the dominant social narrative, not just because it's crass or crude. Let me be very clear here. It's not like I'm saying the left is for some reason not capable of being funny. No, no, no. Far from it. That's basically the opposite of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that whatever the commonly held belief is on a topic that is typically seen as taboo, when someone speaks on it candidly or criticizes or deconstructs that belief in a way that bucks or critiques the mainstream narrative, when and only when that critique is based on truth or reality, that is what makes something funny. Let me give you an example of something that the hard bastard and I touched upon the other day when we were talking about all kinds of stuff. For example, look at the atheist community on YouTube. Basically, it evolved into the anti-SJW community, and that's because one social plague, this rampant, right-wing, conservative, religious stuff, was replaced with another social plague, these social justice warriors, and people who had spent their time mocking the religious neocon extremists have now since moved to mocking the politically correct extremists. Why? Because the cultural gestalt changed. So what is actually funny to mock, because it's funny because it's true, changed with what became socially normative. For example, 4chan, which is seen as the epicenter of the evil alt-right, filled with the ultra-conservative white nationalists, yet also tends to have been, for over the last decade, a source of pure distilled humor. That's because 4chan has always been a white nationalist den of pure extreme politics, right? No! No, friend, not at all. Look, I started using 4chan's B random board around 2004, and to prove my old fag cred, I'll give you my little history of the website. In 2005, the site's, I think it was 2005, it may have been 2006, the site's creator, Moot, banned the posting of gray area topics on B, including jailbait, that's girls under the age of 18. Now, personally, I was not in those threads with girls under 18 being posted, but as an edgy teenager, I viewed this as a restriction of my ability to shitpost to my full capacity, and as an early indicator of the limitation of free speech on the website, that, by the way, never really came. So I, and many other people along with me, went to a new website called 7chan. 7chan went down, I believe, around 2007, and as such, I left for the splintered off, tiny little image boards that formed out of 7chan's corpse, like 0chan, InfinityChan, and most importantly, 99, where I stayed until about 2011, because I really just wanted to talk about comic books and video games faster than the pace of a few posts a month. So after 6 years of giving the middle finger to 4chan and Moot, I came back to 4chan for comic books and video games, and ended up on Poll, on politically incorrect, as will be the fate of all people who use V inevitably. Anyway, I say all that because I am the definition of an old fag. I have seen the humor of 4chan switch completely from being against religious and conservative, morally based speech policing to being against social justice and anti-white and liberal speech policing. It has always been about free speech. 4chan and Chan culture in general is a microcosm of this flip, though. And we've been making funny memes since 2004, and we will continue to make funny and offensive memes just as we have been for the last decade and a half in current year, because we are the ones always okay with being true and offensive. And we're getting there. Let me give you a less microcosmic example first, though. One of the most iconic bits of comedy ever recorded is the 1972 stand-up segment 7 Dirty Words, performed by the legendary George Carlin. Certainly a hardcore leftist, and again, someone I still respect and enjoy. In this bit, if you've never heard it, Carlin describes the 7 words you weren't allowed to say on American television at the time. It's quite long, so I won't play it, but I do suggest you check it out. It's still funny to this day. The bit basically describes the concept I've been talking about here for 15 minutes now or whatever, in pure comedic form, and that's that you won't find out what you're not allowed to say until you say it, and it's funny because you're not allowed to say it, and you're not allowed to say it because there is some dominant social force, in that case the US government-run FCC, for some social reason that bars you from speaking your mind. In this case, it's about not being able to use certain words that are deemed dirty by the FCC. It's funny because he mocks the idea that some words are seemingly arbitrarily labeled as intrinsically bad for reasons no one can really describe, including words like tits and fart and piss, which I would think at this point would actually shock some young millennials to realize were words you could not say on television in 1972. I believe this bit perfectly illustrates and illuminates the changing culture over time, from left-leaning culture and left-leaning humor to right-leaning culture and right-leaning humor. In addition to just being hilariously performed and constructed, this bit became a sensation. It became famous. It became iconic because it was funny, because it's true. For example, he mentions you can say the word cockeyed in terms of your eyes being crossed, and you could say the word cock in terms of a cockfight of 2 chickens, but you can't say the word cocksucker. Again, funny because it's true, even now, pretty much true, in terms of mainstream television. 40 years later, right-wing memes are eviscerating the sides of people all over the political spectrum. Just look at all of the centrists and anti-SJWs on Twitter reposting and laughing at right-wing memes. Look at the Republic of Kekistan. It's just the repetition and reposting of a bunch of right-wing memes and jokes, mostly being shared by centrists, liberals, and leftists, which is, by the way, clearly shitlord appropriation. And on that note, I do apologize for my perpetual inability to stay on track, but speaking of appropriation, look at how the left has begun stealing terms like triggered and snowflake and been using them to describe the right. Excuse you, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. Admittedly, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't seen right-wingers who actually were triggered to hell and back at times, but the term snowflake, specifically right-wing snowflake, that's a little bit absurd. Prove me wrong, I think it's a little silly. Look, these terms were funny because they were used to describe real-world phenomena of social justice millennials, equating not liking something with having post-traumatic stress disorder, and coming up with all kinds of new ways to be uniquely oppressed. Hey, that sounds more like actual appropriation, if there is such a thing at all, because you're actually taking one group's thing that's funny, and then applying it to your own group and destroying any semblance of humor it ever had. Okay, back on track. Let me go back to that Ricky Gervais quote, the guilt-free truth. And that is because the person making the joke is the one assuming responsibility for the joke, and any negative connotation or backlash that may come from it from the cultural dominant normative behavior that deems something taboo about this topic, it's not going to go to the listener, it's going to go to the comedian. Meanwhile, the listener is free to laugh and sit back in relative or complete anonymity, and oh friends, anonymity is what really got me into social science, and I could talk your ear off about de-individuation. But the point is, when you are de-individuated, ended, that is when you are anonymous, you are no longer subject to social norms. That's in Bardo 1969. And so if the humor is offensively challenging the dominant social gestalt in a clever and honest and accurate way, you as a listener are free to laugh without potentially facing any negative outcome. Of course, the comedian is not free from that same blowback, and that's why we see so few conservative comedians, because for the last 40-some years, religiously oriented neoconservatism has been the dominant gestalt, and as such, successful comedians tended to be leftists who were capable of accurately showing something taboo that was funny and describing it in a humorous way because it was true, in the face of said religious neocon castigation and condemnation. Now, we're a little bit in a different place. We've reached a level of free speech policing pretty much never seen in the history of modern mass media, well, aka in the history of all mass media. The blowback toward conservative comedians for telling the truth in a humorous way is far worse than what we saw towards leftists just a few decades ago. These people, most of them, are never going to see a dime from their work either, because while George Carlin could give stand-up cursing like a sailor while talking about a thing that was not allowed on television, clearly Sam Hyde can't have a TV show just because he likes to mess with social justice warriors, all because a Jew claimed he saw non-extant swastikas on his TV show. That sounds familiar. Where have I seen this before? Oh yeah, that's why we don't have many conservative or right-wing comedians though, guys. This is why. Look at what happened to Dick Masterson for more evidence. The only place you can get away with being a conservative comedian is on the internet, and Steven Crowder is probably the best example of a currently successful right-wing comedian, but he's also very tame. I like Crowder, but he's very tame. It's because of this inability to speak earnestly that instead results in the creation of anonymous memes shared anonymously, where de-individuated viewers can laugh in the privacy of their own homes without fear of being lambasted or castigated. This is the guilt-free truth of comedy. As such, these leftist pundits, playing it safe by playing to their audience, are engaging essentially in a perpetual inside joke because it's only funny to those who have already memorized it. I mean, hey, look how dumb George Bush is. That's a piss-poor joke, but it was at least partially based in truth and reality, and that's where all of these currently successful pundits got where they are, by making that exact joke, for making jokes that were mildly offensive and at least partially based in truth, and that was to counter the neocon Republican administrations, and was a very common social opinion 15 years ago, but not the overwhelming gestalt, because obviously the Republicans were in office. But now, regardless of how you feel about Trump, you can't just call him an idiot as being the only crux and being the only pith of your joke. You can't just make that your only joke. You can't just go on stage and make jokes about how everyone who doesn't agree with you is evil and wrong. Sorry, when it's not based in reality, it's not funny. It's just an inside joke to socially rehearse with those who already know it. So I was mulling around with the idea of talking about Schumer's special and how hilariously butt-blasted she and the left were about the reaction to her special, and as I was doing this, I was sitting down, I was browsing my neo-Nazi hate website, when I stumbled across a thread on humor that, regarding my experience with humor theory, I found very interesting, and that I contributed to, and I was reading it and going along with it, and I came across this post, and one of the funniest things of all to me was that while I was reading this thread and I was reading this post, I was also simultaneously listening to Hard Bastard talk to his friend, both of whom escaped the Jehovah's Witness cult together, watching them talk about JW propaganda and listen to it. And as I was doing these two things simultaneously, I audibly said out loud, "Holy shit, I see the connection." So let's read this post that I found on my hate website, and major props to this anon, because whoa dude, I think you nailed it more than anyone else really has, and this post didn't really even get any responses, so I was like, whoop, you got it, so here it is. Okay. Their perception of reality is so wrapped up in them being right and us being wrong that if they were to admit they were wrong and we were right about something, anything, the entire house of cards would come crashing down. It's because their whole worldview isn't based on facts or reality, it's about emotional arguments and chanting their reality into existence. As soon as they stop chanting, the illusion vanishes. I saw He Will Not Divide Us as a literal manifestation of this proverbial chanting of reality. It's a religious experience that they are having right now. All the virtue signaling is about believers who may be having some doubts reinforcing their beliefs in the group. And holy shit, you guys, like I said, as I was reading this, I saw a Bastard's video responding to JW propaganda where they're all gathering around a group, going through this same exact process, essentially letter to letter. They can't question it for a second or they will lose their faith. Any who are not with them are heretics and they persecute them with zealousness. It is no exaggeration to call the modern leftism a religion. Oh, sweet Odin, has anyone ever been more on point? Whoever wrote this, please reach out to me if you see this video, please, because I thought that was a great post. You're a mental god among mere midgets, I guess. It honestly made me feel like a fucking idiot for not previously coming to these exact same conclusions and connecting the dots about how leftist humor works as a method of cult, maybe not indoctrination, but of cult recitation and the maintenance of a cult. Anyway, damn, back to why the right is funny and the left is not in current year. So you know why I laugh at a joke about Islam being the religion of peace after a Muslim blows something up, like the recent attack in London, or rapes a bunch of Swedes? Yeah, that's dark gallows humor, but dark gallows humor is basically all we have. Because it's offensive, and it's offensive because it's funny, and it's funny because it's true. It's funny because they call themselves the religion of peace, and then they go and commit all these atrocities. There's a interesting and funny and amusing dichotomy there. Funny because it's true, it's dark, but it's true. Of course, you'll never hear a joke about that on mainstream TV right now, because although the George Carlins of the world, of the right-leaning world, are probably certainly out there, they can't function openly in this climate, so they take instead to the creation of anonymous memes. Even people who share these memes beyond just chuckling to themselves can claim, well, it's just a meme I saved, I didn't make it, avoiding some of the vitriol typically reserved only for the comedian. I mean, that's the entire premise behind Kekistan, isn't it? Either, well, we're being ironic, or, well, it's just a meme, we didn't make it, we're just sharing it. Again, this removes any potential guilt from the one enjoying the comedy. This is the guilt-free truth of comedy. Leftist comedy is dead unless they can become offensive again. And not offensive like Amy Schumer talking about being a dirty whore for an hour, and not offensive like Trevor Noah just calling Trump an idiot for an hour. No, 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 no. Offensive because it's shocking, and shocking because it's true, because someone has the balls to say and talk about reality, to talk about something that we recognize, all of us, on some true and deep level, that we recognize as truth. That is what makes something truly funny. That's why the left also gets so anal-pained about our memes, either because they're so indoctrinated that anything contrary to everything they already believe 100% is anathema, or because it activates some level of cognitive dissonance in their brains where they recognize the truthfulness of the information despite it being contrary to everything they've been taught to believe. It's sort of cult behavior. Watching and laughing at John Oliver once a week is the same type of cult-like behavioral rehearsal as the meetings the JWs or any cult must constantly attend. It's in order to maintain a line of unquestionable thought. For example, with that religion of peace joke, it's probably true that a joke like that would reach out on some deep level to any person still thinking that when contrasted with an act of Muslim violence, this claim that Islam is the religion of peace is quite funny. This is why leftists try so hard to ensure that no actual data, no actual real facts about things like migrant violence in Europe are released, because if they get out, then someone might actually find that joke funny rather than just get upset by it. Instead, you have to watch your priests, if you will, your Samantha Bee, your Trevor Noah. Also, you can laugh together at an unfunny joke to practice your faith. Have you ever been to a Catholic church? The Lord be with you. And also with you, responds the congregation. By the way, I'm not calling Christianity the same as a cult, not in the least, but it is obviously a religion, and this recitation and repetition is what leftist humor has pretty much become. It's a religion. Trump is an idiot. Ha 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 ha, responds the congregation. Look, let me be very clear. I find Trump very funny for two reasons. One, I find he himself is a person to be hilarious. His tweets have brought me near to tears just for how freaking honest they were, protruding nipples and such. But also because I think he's quite a ridiculous person, and I am very happy to make fun of him, or laugh at him, or make jokes mocking him. I'm willing to do all of that. But my jokes are pretty much based in truth. Just calling him a Cheeto? That's not funny. It's just boring. Come up with a better joke, guys. Seriously. Just engaging in autoerotic paramasturbatory cult-like recitation about how stupid and orange he is. That's not funny because it's nothing but an inside joke that you're being told to laugh at. Make a good joke about Trump, guys. Jesus. I mean, have you ever been in a group of people and all of them have an inside joke and they're just spewing it over and over? It's a joke that you're not in on. That is how funny your joke is. It's only funny to you. Outside of that, in the real world, it's not a funny joke. That is what it is like when people like Samantha Bee and John Oliver talk about Trump. They're just engaging in the social identity display of responding to a social cue that they're supposed to laugh at, a joke that the whole group identity shares, aka lol Drumpf, so stupid, with no context, no truthfulness behind it. It's just an inside joke, that's all it is. It has no inherent and objective humor. I mean, Pokemon Go to the Polls is a horrific joke because when you're in the cultural mainstream, that's about as truthful and offensive as you can get, isn't it? That's about as truthful as the left can get. Pokemon Go to the Polls. Meanwhile, Trump can just destroy Twitter because he doesn't give any shits. He doesn't give any shits about being culturally sensitive. Oh, and on that bit, see how I'm capable of making fun of Trump? I have several times in the past, and I will continue to forever. Probably more importantly, how I'm capable of making fun of myself. In addition to being incapable of telling the truth, these leftist comedians are also incapable of making fun of themselves in any real or meaningful way. I think it was Sargon and Dr. Layman talking to John when the two of them mentioned how all of us not woefully on the left engage in gallows humor, and that was actually one of the things that pissed off some social justice fundies who were incapable of understanding why this stuff is funny because it just triggers them. I was just thinking about that the other day. I was talking to a friend on the phone not too long ago, and she was going on and on and on about Trump is literal Hitler, and anyone who supports him is a Nazi, and yada 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 yada. And I felt bad. I love this friend, but it was like, what do you want me to say? You know I support Trump. What do you want me to say? And eventually I just started becoming quite tired of this baseless tirade, and so in response, I interjected and said, you know, when you think about it, Hitler did nothing wrong. And a click. A shocking joke, I guess, that I made to be self-deprecating. I mean, you were kind of calling me a Nazi, so I was like, fine, Hitler did nothing wrong. I love this friend, I do, but there was no capacity to get through to her, and as such I made a joke. But the left is so permanently offended, not only can they not even approach being self-deprecating towards themselves, they can't even allow us on the right to make jokes at our own expense. That is how utterly unfunny they have become. That is the level of anti-humor. That's where we're at now, folks. I'm sorry for how long this video is. Anyway, my point is this. Amy Schumer. People didn't dislike your special because you're a woman. They disliked it because it was not funny. And it wasn't funny because it had one joke, relying on an instantaneous expectation violation, vagina. Other than that, it's only just going to be whores expressing their whore social identity by cheering for their fellow whores in joke who find anything beyond the first instance of this vagina stuff entertaining, and potentially leftists who engage in some cult-like behavioral recitation and rehearsed response. Your jokes aren't funny because they aren't commenting on anything truthful or real. They're just reliant on shock value, and the shock value of a joke is temporally relevant, as I mentioned in that Hurricane Sandy study, meaning if you make the same shocking joke over and over again, it's a no-brainer. Eventually it stops becoming funny because it stops being unexpected and becomes anticipated, and inevitably, painfully banal. I hope I have explained in full what I meant by my claim that comedy must be offensive, and again, while sometimes just something shocking like a racial slur can be funny, it's shockingly edgy, which is a large amount of internet humor, and certainly the type of stuff I shitpost and enjoy engaging in, when I too am anonymous, when it comes to lasting, permanent, and real humor. That which is always truly going to be funny is that which is a critique of mainstream culture, a critique that is both true and honest social commentary. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. I'm Aiden Paladin, Altana Volt.